Welcome back to Daily Encouragements. Today I spent an hour with one of my students and we were talking about how to answer questions and some of the exam processes and how the Board of Examiners operate and how they think and how to structure some of the answers. And the more time I spent with her, the more I could see she was really trying her best. Very clever student, wonderful student, great nature, working hard, trying to get the best result. But I could see she was getting stuck at times on trying to get the right answer and trying to recall the information and work it hard at trying to get all the marks out of the test. And that's a good thing to do as a student. But in real life, sometimes we don't have a board of examiners who are structuring questions for us to answer, and so we can get stuck in a answer mentality where we think that life is a bunch of questions. We think life is a test, and we got to do our best to answer the question. And then we become very judgmental and very critical and very harsh because you either answer the question correctly or incorrectly. And if you want to be really, really merciful, you can have multiple answers to the same question. And whilst I was teaching her, it just struck me to approach life there's a better approach to life than trying to answer the question. The better approach is to ask the right question, to change the question, to rip the question apart, to look at the question at different angles. And if you can come to an understanding of having a higher value for asking the right question than trying to get the right answer, you transition from a place of someone who is subject to the market, where someone else asks a question, something else asks a question, or makes a demand, and you're trying to respond to it and react to it. And so you're always behind the eight ball, you're always behind the curve, trying to scramble for an answer, trying to get there, trying to memorize the best information you can for the next occasion where a question comes up. And so you become a consumer. You are subject to the market. But when you learn how to ask questions, to change the questions, to rip a question apart, to choose not to answer certain questions and only answer other questions, when you focus more on the question than the answer, you transition from being a market follower to being not even a market leader, which is good at answering questions, but you change the market. You open up new markets. You no longer become a consumer who's subject to the up and down of the market. You now become a producer, which can open up whole other markets. And asking the right question is a completely different skill set, ability, and some internal faculties than the ability to answer a question. Whenever people came at Jesus and asked him questions, most of the time he would change the question. He wouldn't give them the answer that they were trying to get him to produce, because this answer was incorrect and this answer was incorrect. So he would avoid answering it and change the question and then asking them questions. And they got so angry because the trying to get an answer out of Jesus mentality didn't work. It was all a plan for entrapment. And so he became the market maker as opposed to a market follower. He became a producer rather than a consumer when he would change the question. And so I want to ask you a question. What questions are you asking? Are you just trying to come up with the answer? Are you trying your best to get through a test? Are you trying to prepare for the next answer that is demanded of you? Or are you making a demand by asking the right question? Is the question that's coming to you something about how are you going to pay your rent at the end of the month? Because that's something that is asked of all of us. And sometimes that question is more penetrating than other times. And so are you focused on the answer of trying to answer the rent question? Or is your question not how do I pay my rent? How do I produce that answer? But is your question, how do I make more money than what my rent is demanding? How do I change the question? How do I change my mindset so that I'm not having to answer the rent question anymore, that I've got surplus because I'm asking the right questions. I'm not having to come up with the answer after the fact. You think about the whole rental market. You pay rent before the month starts in most countries in the world. You pay for something before you even get to use it. That's the consumer market. And that's what an answer is. You have to reply to the demand of a landlord who says, hey, pay me now or you don't get to live here. You have to answer that question. But when you're a landlord, you get to ask the question, can you pay the rent before you even use it? And that's part of the blessing. You will be the head and not the tail, be first and not last. There's something about the blessing that is able to not just answer questions, not just provide answers, but ask questions. And you can actually become the person who lends money than the person who borrows money. So I want to ask you the question. What questions are you asking? Are you just trying to find the answer for rent? Are you trying to find the answer for healing? Are you trying to find all these answers? Or are you going to elevate your ability and the dimensions that you operate to asking the right question? Because if you can learn how to ask the right question, then you change the market for where the answers come. When I first started my first real job, I did some jobs as a student and some things that I loved. I worked in a pizza shop. I thought it was great. It was a great learning experience. But when I first started my career, I was asked a question. What are you going to do for a career? What are you going to do with your life? And the answer was, the best answer I could come up with was, go and get a job in a bank. You're good at maths, so go and get a financial job. And there's a money market there. You can go and make a name for yourself. You can make room for yourself. Get your foot in the door. Get any job, and then climb that corporate ladder as best as you can. Sean, you're loyal. You're consistent. You're faithful. You can learn anything, and you're gonna make a good career for yourself. The answer was, get the best job you can. But I felt so unfulfilled in that job. I felt bored. I had computer screens around me. I had financial information. It was a high intensity environment. I was confirming billions of US dollars a day for trades. I was just a cog in the machine. I just pulled the lever and pressed the button. In mathematical terms, it wasn't a particularly difficult mathematical job, but it wasn't a bank. It was a State Street, New York based financial market company. And it was a really great start. It was a fantastic job. But I felt so empty. I felt so bored after the first 3 months, after I stopped learning the job, and I just realized I was just a cog in the machine. And I realized that the answer that I was trying to provide, it was the correct answer, but it was the wrong question. The question I tried to answer was, what are you going to do for a career? The question I should have asked is, what's the purpose for my life? And when I started to evaluate the real question, not the question that was provided by something else, by society, or by religion, or by mommy and daddy, or the world around me, what my friend group or my peers thought. When I stopped trying to define my life by their question and give the best answer I could, which was the best answer for me, when I looked at the question of purpose, that's when my answers became a whole new realm of possibilities, because I couldn't answer that question. I couldn't provide good answers with the old question. I had to come to a new question, and then my world opened up and I saw whole new horizons. And when I processed that and I saw the end of the career path, when I saw the end of that question, the best that I could come up with was still miserable. And it was a very easy decision. I can tell you now, I had all the benefits. I had all the peer group. I had, the climbing the ladder opportunities, all of that. People giving me pats on the back saying, Sean, you're going to go far. You're going to go well. Offers of promotions and pay rises and all the rest. Because they can see I was unhappy. They could see something. I wasn't fulfilled in that place. And so they were trying to give me any carrot they could to keep me to stay. And I still did my job well, but they just knew I wasn't happy. And when I asked that new question, I quit that job with ease. There's nothing in me to this day, 15 years on, that think I wish I was still in the banking world. I still wish that I was answering the question of, what's your career path? What are you going to do for a job? I left that and I became jobless for a couple of months, and then I became a waiter. And I earned much less money as a waiter, and it was a dirty job. I used to wash dishes and I'd traipse around on my feet for 16 hours, 20 hours sometimes. And it was much more difficult, much less recognition with my peer group, because I went from a banker to a bartender at some occasions. But I was now on the path to answering the right question. I was no longer just a consumer and reacting to the market. I now was producing my own market. And whilst I was much lower down on the social rankings, I didn't care, because I was in the realm of the right question. And that was the beginning process. That was the seed for me to step out in confidence, because now I'm asking the question every day, what's the purpose of my life? Not how can I fulfill a career and make the most money. And I've made much more money answering the right question than I would have had with trying to answer the money question under the wrong umbrella, under that wrong dimension. And so there's something in the heart of all of us that is yearning for fulfilling purpose. And if you're trying to answer a question that someone else dictates to you, or the people around you dictate to you, you are subject to whether that question is a good question or a bad question, whether their agenda is good or whether it's bad. You've got to be subject to a purpose question that God has placed within you, and have a much higher value of that than the answers, the best answers that can be provided in that old framework. So I want to ask you the question: what questions are you asking? Are you asking the questions that everyone else is asking? Are you asking the questions that are being fed to you? Are you asking the questions where the answers are predictable and safe and boring and limited? Or are you asking difficult questions? Why am I here? Where did I come from? What's my purpose? What is the thing I want to look back on my deathbed? When I look back at my life, what is it that I will feel purpose from, or feel fulfillment from? What is it that I value? Is it more hours on that career path that you want to climb the rung so you can be the manager of all the other boring, miserable people? Do you really want to be the top of the heap of something that you don't really enjoy? I'm not saying that that's bad. Maybe that is part of a process. I did some crappy jobs. I cleaned toilets and I made pizzas and I waited tables. But it was in process so I could answer a bigger question. What questions are you asking? Break out of the paradigm of being on the back foot of answering questions, and you start to ask the questions. And ask God, what are the right questions to ask? What should I be thinking about? What should I be asking? And when you do that, there's a realm of possibilities that are open to you, because you now start asking questions that can invite those answers. Don't be afraid to ask a question that you don't know the answer to. I want to ask you the question: what questions are you asking?